The scene opens with Jeff Bezos seated at his desk inside the sprawling, modernist mansion he calls home, a fortress of glass and steel perched atop the hills of Medina, Washington. It is late afternoon, and the golden light of the setting sun filters through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the room. His workspace is immaculate, almost clinical, with neatly stacked papers, a sleek MacBook Pro humming softly, and a cup of black coffee cooling beside him. Despite the serene environment, there's an air of restlessness about him. He drums his fingers lightly on the polished mahogany surface, his mind preoccupied with the endless demands of running one of the largest corporations in the world. A sharp knock interrupts his thoughts. Bezos looks up, slightly annoyed by the intrusion, but then nods as his assistant enters the room holding a small envelope. "This just arrived for you, sir," she says, placing it gently on the desk before retreating quietly. Bezos frowns at the envelope. It's plain, unassuming, nothing like the usual corporate correspondence he receives daily. There's no return address, only his name written in neat cursive handwriting that feels oddly personal. Intrigued, he picks it up, turning it over in his hands as if trying to decipher its origin. With deliberate care, he slides a letter opener beneath the flap and pulls out its contents. Inside, he finds two items, a single-page handwritten letter and several faded photographs. The first photo catches his eye immediately. It shows a young boy, no older than 10, standing barefoot in what appears to be a dusty courtyard surrounded by crumbling brick walls. The boy has dark, tousled hair and piercing eyes that seem to stare directly into the camera lens, exuding both defiance and vulnerability. Something about those eyes unsettles Bezos, not because they remind him of anyone specific, but because they feel hauntingly familiar, as though they hold secrets meant solely for him. He sets the photo aside and unfolds the letter, scanning the words quickly at first, then slowing down as their weight begins to sink in. The letter is addressed to him personally and signed by Sister Mary Agnes, a nun who runs an orphanage in a remote village in Kenya. Her prose is simple yet heartfelt, describing the boy in the photograph, his name is Lucas, and explaining how he came to live under her care after being abandoned as an infant. She writes of his resilience despite the hardships he's endured, his insatiable curiosity, and his remarkable aptitude for solving problems others deemed impossible. But it's the final paragraph that stops Bezos cold. "Mr. Bezos, I believe, this child was placed in my path for a reason. Perhaps God intended for me to find him so that I could eventually bring him to you. You see, Lucas possesses not only extraordinary gifts, but also knowledge that suggests he may have a connection to your past. Whether this connection is mere coincidence or divine intervention, I cannot say. What I do know is that Lucas needs someone like you, a man of vision and resources, to help him unlock his full potential. Please consider meeting him, for his sake, and perhaps for yours." Bezos lowers the letter slowly, his expression unreadable. 1,000 questions flood his mind. How could a boy from a Kenyan orphanage possibly have any connection to him? And yet, deep within the recesses of his subconscious, a faint memory stirs. A fleeting image of a woman he once knew long ago, her face blurred by time, but her presence still lingering somewhere in the shadows of his past. Could this be more than just a random act of charity? Or is it something far greater, a reckoning he never saw coming? For several minutes, Bezos sits motionless, staring at the photo of Lucas. Outside, the wind rustles through the trees, carrying with it the distant sound of birdsong. Finally, he exhales sharply, making a decision. Whatever this mystery entails, he knows one thing for certain: he cannot ignore it. With a sense of purpose he hasn't felt in years, he reaches for his phone and dials his private secretary. "Book me a flight to Nairobi," he says firmly. "There's someone I need to meet." The narrative shifts now, leaving behind the opulent confines of Bezos's mansion and plunging us into a world starkly different, a place where survival itself feels like an act of defiance. We are transported to St. Agnes Orphanage, nestled in the arid outskirts of Nakuru, Kenya. The orphanage is modest, its whitewashed walls cracked and weathered by years of relentless sun and sporadic rains. A rusted metal gate creaks open to reveal a dusty courtyard surrounded by low-rise buildings, their corrugated tin roofs glinting faintly under the midday sun. Children of all ages dart around barefoot, their laughter echoing off the walls despite the harshness of their circumstances. Among them stands Lucas, though he isn't playing with the others. Instead, he sits cross-legged beneath a gnarled acacia tree, his hands busy tinkering with what appears to be a jumble of wires, gears, and scraps of metal scavenged from discarded electronics. His concentration is absolute, his brow furrowed as he carefully adjusts a tiny motor salvaged from an old radio. To the casual observer, it might look like aimless fiddling, but those who know him understand that Lucas has a gift, an uncanny ability to see potential in things most people discard without a second thought. Sister Mary Agnes watches him from a distance, her heart swelling with pride and concern in equal measure. She remembers the day Lucas arrived at the orphanage vividly. It was nearly a decade ago, during the rainy season, when the roads leading to the village were little more than muddy tracks. A local farmer had found him abandoned near a riverbank, wrapped in a threadbare blanket and crying weakly. No note, no identifying marks, just a fragile infant left to fend for himself against the unforgiving elements. Sister Mary took him in without hesitation, naming him Lucas after the patron saint of lost causes. From the beginning, Lucas stood out, not because of any physical trait, but because of his quiet intensity. As a toddler, he rarely spoke, preferring instead to observe everything around him with those piercing eyes that seemed far too wise for his age. By the time he turned 5, it became clear that his mind worked differently from other children's. He would spend hours dismantling broken appliances donated to the orphanage, studying their inner workings with a level of focus that bordered on obsession. When asked how he knew which parts went where, he would simply shrug and say, "It tells me." But for all his brilliance, Lucas carried burdens heavier than any child should bear. Life at the orphanage wasn't easy, resources were scarce, and bullying was rampant among the older children. They called him names: weirdo, freak, mocking his strange habits and solitary nature. Once, a group of boys cornered him in the dormitory, taunting him until tears streamed down his face. But even then, Lucas refused to fight back. Instead, he retreated further into himself, finding solace in his inventions and the company of Sister Mary, who became both mother and mentor to him. What few understood, and what Sister Mary kept hidden from everyone except God, was that Lucas suffered not only from external hardships, but also from recurring nightmares that plagued his sleep. In these dreams, he saw fragments of a life he couldn't possibly remember: towering skyscrapers, luxurious offices, and a man with sharp features and cold eyes who loomed over him like a specter. Sometimes the man spoke words Lucas couldn't quite make out, his voice muffled yet commanding. Other times, he simply stared, his expression unreadable but undeniably menacing. Each morning, Lucas woke drenched in sweat, the images lingering in his mind like smoke after a fire. These dreams weighed heavily on Sister Mary. She prayed often for guidance, unsure whether they were mere figments of a troubled imagination or something deeper, perhaps echoes of a past Lucas had no conscious memory of. Over time, she began to piece together clues. There was the way he instinctively gravitated toward technology, handling gadgets with a familiarity that defied his upbringing. Then there were the rare moments when he let slip phrases in English, a language none of the other children spoke fluently. And finally, there was the scar on his right wrist, a faint line shaped like a crescent moon, almost imperceptible unless you looked closely. It was this scar that convinced Sister Mary to send the letter to Jeff Bezos, hoping against hope that it might lead her to answers. Back in Seattle, Bezos spends restless nights pondering the same questions. After booking his flight to Nairobi, he finds himself unable to concentrate on work, his thoughts consumed by the boy in the photograph. He researches St. Agnes Orphanage, online, scrolling through grainy images of smiling children and reading testimonials from donors. Yet none of it brings him closer to understanding why Sister Mary believes Lucas is connected to him. Frustrated, he reaches out to Mackenzie Scott, his ex-wife, seeking advice. Their relationship has been strained since their divorce, but she agrees to meet him for coffee at a quiet cafe downtown. "I don't know what to do," Bezos admits, stirring sugar into his espresso. "This kid, there's something about him. Something I can't explain." Mackenzie listens patiently, her sharp intellect picking up on nuances Bezos himself hasn't fully processed. "You've always been driven by curiosity," she says gently. "Maybe this is just another puzzle you're trying to solve. But be careful, Jeff. People aren't puzzles. They're human beings with feelings and histories you might not be prepared to handle." Her words linger in his mind long after their meeting ends. That night, as he lies awake staring at the ceiling, Bezos allows himself to revisit memories he's buried for decades. He thinks about his early days at Amazon, the sacrifices he made, the relationships he neglected in pursuit of success, and he wonders if adopting Lucas might somehow redeem the choices he regrets, or if it will only open old wounds he spent years trying to heal. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, Lucas continues his routine at the orphanage, unaware that his life is about to change forever. On the morning of Bezos' arrival, Sister Mary calls him aside and explains that a visitor is coming, a very important man who wants to meet him. Lucas listens silently, his expression unreadable. When she asks if he's nervous, he shakes his head. "I already know him," he says cryptically, clutching the small robot he built tightly in his hands. "He's been waiting for me." As the plane carrying Jeff Bezos touches down in Nairobi, thousands of miles away in Seattle, the ripple effects of his impending adoption begin to stir within the walls of his former family home, a sprawling estate shared by Mackenzie Scott and their 4 children. Though Bezos has long since moved on from the marital home, the shadow of his past decisions looms large over the lives of those he left behind. His relationship with Mackenzie is cordial at best, a fragile truce maintained for the sake of their children, but beneath the surface lies a reservoir of unresolved tension. Mackenzie, now remarried and thriving as an acclaimed author and philanthropist, carries herself with quiet dignity. She has built a new life filled with purpose, channeling her wealth into causes close to her heart: education reform, racial equity, and climate justice. Yet even she cannot escape the specter of Jeff's legacy. Their children, now teenagers and young adults, have grown up navigating the complexities of being heirs to one of the most polarizing figures in modern history. To the outside world, they are symbols of privilege. Within the confines of their family, they grapple with feelings of neglect, inadequacy, and confusion. The eldest, Preston, bears the brunt of these emotions more than the others. At 22, he is strikingly similar to his father in appearance, tall, lean, with piercing blue eyes, but their similarities end there. Where Jeff thrives on ambition and control, Preston struggles with self-doubt, constantly questioning whether he'll ever measure up to his father's towering achievements. He dropped out of college 2 years ago, much to Jeff's disapproval, and spends his days working odd jobs and tinkering with music production in a makeshift studio in his mother's garage. His siblings, Colin, Christina, and Grant, are younger, each carving out their own paths while wrestling with the weight of their surname. For Colin, the middle child, the pressure manifests differently. A high school senior with aspirations of becoming a marine biologist, he feels suffocated by the expectations placed upon him. "People always assume I'm going to take over Amazon someday," he once confided to his therapist. "But what, if I don't want to? What if I just want to study coral reefs and save endangered species?" His frustration often spills over into arguments with Jeff during their rare visits, leaving both father and son feeling alienated. Christina, the only daughter, has learned to navigate the spotlight with grace, using her platform to advocate for women's rights and mental health awareness. But even she isn't immune to the cracks in her parents' fractured relationship. During family gatherings, which are infrequent and awkward at best, she finds herself caught between her mother's stoic resilience and her father's detached pragmatism. It's a balancing act that leaves her emotionally drained, though she hides it well behind a warm smile and quick wit. Then there's Grant, the youngest, who seems determined to distance himself from the Bezos name altogether. At 14, he's rebellious and fiercely independent, refusing to attend the elite private schools his siblings once did. Instead, he attends a public school in a working-class neighborhood where he plays soccer and hangs out with friends who have no idea who his father is or care. For Grant, the Bezos fortune is less a blessing and more a burden, a constant reminder of the gulf between his reality and the lives of those around him. It's against this backdrop of familial discord that Jeff's decision to adopt Lucas takes shape, not merely as an act of charity, but as a desperate attempt to rewrite the narrative of his life. Deep down, he knows that his relationship with his biological children is irreparably damaged, shaped by years of absenteeism and misplaced priorities. In Lucas, he sees an opportunity not only to right past wrongs, but also to redefine what it means to be a father. But the road ahead is fraught with challenges. As news of his impending trip to Kenya spreads, whispers begin to circulate among his inner circle. Some view the adoption as a publicity stunt, a calculated move to polish his tarnished image. After years of criticism over labor practices at Amazon warehouses and allegations of monopolistic behavior, others see it as a genuine expression of remorse, a chance for redemption in a life defined by relentless ambition. Either way, the stakes are high and the outcome uncertain. Back in Nairobi, Sister Mary Agnes prepares Lucas for the arrival of the man who may soon become his father. She dresses him in his best clothes, a neatly pressed shirt and trousers donated by a local church, and combs his unruly hair, though it springs back into its usual disarray almost immediately. "Remember," she tells him gently, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder, "you don't have to say anything you don't want to. Just be yourself," Lucas nods, clutching the small robot he built tighter than ever. Despite his outward calm, his mind races with questions. Who is this man coming to meet him? Why does he feel such a strange connection to him, as though they've known each other for lifetimes? And most importantly, will he finally find the answers to the dreams that haunt his nights? When the moment arrives and Bezos steps off the plane, the contrast between the two worlds could not be starker. The humid African air envelops him like a thick blanket, a stark departure from the crisp efficiency of his corporate empire. As he climbs into the car that will take him to St. Agnes Orphanage, he catches glimpses of poverty and resilience side by side, children playing in the streets, vendors hawking goods from makeshift stalls, and mothers carrying baskets of fruit on their heads. Each scene reinforces the enormity of the decision he's about to make. By the time he arrives at the orphanage, the sun is beginning to set, casting the courtyard in hues of orange and gold. Sister Mary greets him warmly, ushering him inside where Lucas waits patiently under the acacia tree. For a moment, neither speaks. They simply stare at each other, taking in the uncanny resemblance that neither can fully explain. Then, slowly, Lucas extends his hand, offering the tiny robot as a gift. Bezos takes it, examining the intricate craftsmanship with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "It's incredible," he says finally, his voice tinged with emotion. "You made this?" Lucas nods, his eyes locking onto Bezos's, with an intensity that sends a shiver down the billionaire's spine. In that moment, something shifts. An unspoken bond forms between them, fragile yet undeniable. Bezos realizes that adopting Lucas won't just change the boy's life. It will change his own in ways he can scarcely imagine. The air in the orphanage courtyard is thick with anticipation as Jeff Bezos kneels down to meet Lucas at eye level, his towering frame folding awkwardly into a crouch. The late afternoon sun casts long shadows across the dusty ground, and the faint hum of cicadas fills the silence that stretches between them. For a moment, neither speaks. Bezos, because he's unsure how to bridge the gap between his world and this boy's, and Lucas, because he seems content to observe, his piercing gaze never wavering from Bezos's face. Bezos holds the small robot in his hands, turning it over carefully as if inspecting a priceless artifact. It's a crude yet ingenious creation, assembled from scraps of metal, wires, and bits of plastic scavenged from discarded electronics. A tiny motor powers its movements, causing its limbs to twitch sporadically when activated. To anyone else, it might appear as little more than a child's hobby project, but to Bezos, it represents something far greater, a spark of ingenuity that reminds him of his own early days tinkering with computers in his parents' garage. "This is remarkable," Bezos says finally, breaking the silence. His voice is soft, almost reverent, betraying a vulnerability rarely seen in the man who built an empire out of algorithms and ambition. "How did you figure out how to make it move like this?" Lucas tilts his head slightly, considering the question before responding. When he speaks, his voice is quiet but steady, carrying a maturity that belies his age. "I watch things," he says simply. "When people throw stuff away, I take it apart to see how it works. Then I put it back together differently." Bezos nods slowly, absorbing the simplicity of the explanation. There's no arrogance in Lucas's tone, no desire to impress or seek validation. He speaks matter-of-factly, as though solving complex problems is as natural to him as breathing. Yet beneath the surface, Bezos senses a depth to the boy that goes beyond mere intellect, a quiet determination, perhaps even a guardedness born of years spent fending for himself. Sister Mary Agnes watches the exchange from a distance, her heart swelling with cautious optimism. She knows this moment is pivotal, not just for Lucas, but for Bezos as well. If the billionaire can look past the layers of wealth and privilege that shield him from the raw realities of life, he might glimpse the soul of the child standing before him. And if Lucas can trust Bezos enough to let him in, he might find the family he's always yearned for. Encouraged by the tentative connection forming between them, Sister Mary steps forward and suggests they sit together under the shade of the acacia tree. Bezos agrees, settling onto a weathered wooden bench while Lucas perches beside him, still clutching another half-finished invention in his lap. The nun brings them glasses of cool water, which they sip gratefully as the conversation begins to flow more freely. "Do you like building things?" Bezos asks, leaning forward slightly to maintain eye contact. It's a simple question, but one designed to draw Lucas out of his shell. Lucas shrugs, his fingers tracing absent-mindedly over the exposed circuitry of the device in his hands. "It's what I do," he replies. "When I'm making something, I don't think about other stuff." "What kind of other stuff?" Bezos presses gently, sensing an opening. For the first time, Lucas hesitates, his gaze dropping to the ground. He doesn't answer immediately, and Bezos wonders if he's pushed too hard. But then, in a voice so soft it's almost a whisper, Lucas says, "Bad dreams, about a man who looks like you." The words hit Bezos like a punch to the gut, sending a jolt of unease coursing through him. He forces himself to remain composed, masking his reaction behind a practiced smile. "What happens in these dreams?" he asks, his tone careful, probing. Lucas shakes his head as if trying to shake loose the memories. "He talks sometimes, but I can't hear what he says. Other times, he just stares. like he's waiting for me to remember something. Bezos feels a chill creep up his spine, though he doesn't fully understand why. Could it be possible that Lucas has some subconscious awareness of their connection? Or is it merely coincidence, a trick of the mind brought on by the stress of abandonment and loss? Whatever the explanation, the revelation deepens Bezos's resolve to uncover the truth. Determined to steer the conversation towards safer territory, Bezos shifts focus back to Lucas's inventions. "Tell me more about this robot," he says, gesturing to the device in his hands. "What does it do?" Lucas brightens visibly at the change in subject, his earlier reticence melting away as he launches into an animated explanation. "It moves around and picks up things," he says, demonstrating by placing a small pebble on the ground. With a flick of a switch, the robot's mechanical arm extends, grasping the stone and lifting it into the air. "I wanted to make something that could help people clean up trash or carry heavy things." Bezos watches in fascination, marveling at the practicality of the design. "That's brilliant," he says sincerely. "You've thought about how it could actually be useful. Most inventors start with ideas that are too complicated to execute. You've gone straight to solving real-world problems." Lucas beams at the praise, a rare smile lighting up his face. For a fleeting moment, Bezos catches a glimpse of the boy beneath the layers of hardship, the curious, creative spirit yearning to be nurtured. It's a side of humanity he hasn't encountered in years, buried under boardroom battles and billion-dollar deals. As the evening wears on, the conversation drifts naturally from inventions to dreams, fears, and hopes for the future. Bezos learns that Lucas loves math and puzzles, devouring every book on the subjects that Sister Mary can provide. He also discovers that Lucas harbors a deep-seated fear of being left behind again, a fear rooted not only in his abandonment as an infant, but also in the bullying he endured at the orphanage. Each revelation chips away at Bezos's defenses, forcing him to confront emotions he's long suppressed. By the time the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of indigo and violet, Bezos feels a profound shift within himself. He realizes that adopting Lucas isn't just about offering the boy a better life. It's about reclaiming a part of himself he lost along the way, the part that once dreamed of changing the world, not just dominating it. Before leaving, Bezos makes a promise to Lucas. "If you're willing, I'd like to bring you home with me to give you a chance to grow and learn and become whoever you're meant to be. But I need you to know that I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes, and I'll probably make more. All I can offer is my best effort to be the father you deserve." Lucas studies him intently, searching for any hint of insincerity. Finding none, he nods slowly. "Okay," he says simply, sealing the agreement with the same quiet confidence that defines everything he does. As Bezos walks back to the car, his mind races with possibilities. He knows the road ahead won't be easy. There will be challenges, misunderstandings, and moments of doubt. But for the first time in years, he feels a sense of purpose that transcends profit margins and stock prices. In Lucas, he sees not just a son, but a mirror reflecting the potential for growth and transformation. The flight back to Seattle is uncharacteristically quiet for Jeff Bezos. Normally, he would spend the hours poring over reports, strategizing with executives via encrypted calls or drafting emails that could shape the future of Amazon. But today, his mind is elsewhere, preoccupied with the boy who now occupies a space in his thoughts that no spreadsheet or business plan ever could. Lucas's face lingers in his memory, those piercing eyes seeming to follow him wherever he goes, demanding answers to questions Bezos isn't sure he's ready to ask. When the plane touches down at Boeing Field, Bezos wastes no time returning to his mansion. He retreats to his private study, shutting out the world as he sifts through the documents Sister Mary Agnes had sent along with her letter. Among them are medical records, adoption papers, or rather, the lack thereof, and a single photograph of a young woman holding an infant, a woman whose features are hauntingly familiar, though Bezos can't quite place why. Her name, according to the sparse notes accompanying the photo, is Dr. Elena Vargas. She was a scientist, brilliant and ambitious, who worked briefly for Amazon in its early days before disappearing without a trace. Bezos stares at the image for a long time, his fingers tracing the edges of the photograph, as if trying to unlock some hidden meaning. There is something about her smile, warm yet guarded, that stirs a faint memory within him. He recalls meeting her once, maybe twice, during a conference in Seattle. She had been part of a team tasked with developing cutting-edge data analytics tools, her expertise earning her accolades from colleagues and superiors alike. Yet despite her talent, she vanished from the company roster less than a year later, leaving behind only rumors of a falling out with management. Determined to piece together the puzzle, Bezos fires up his laptop and begins digging into Amazon's archives. It's a painstaking process, requiring him to navigate layers of bureaucracy and red tape even within his own organization. Eventually, he uncovers fragments of information buried deep within old HR files. Performance reviews praising Dr. Vargas's innovative thinking, cryptic memos hinting at disagreements over intellectual property rights, and finally, a terse termination letter signed by none other than Bezos himself. The discovery hits him like a freight train. He remembers now the heated argument in his office, the accusations of misconduct leveled against her after she allegedly shared proprietary research with a rival firm. At the time, he had dismissed her protests of innocence as desperate attempts to save her career. Now, staring at the evidence, or lack thereof, he wonders if he made a grave mistake. Could she have been framed? And if so, by whom? But the revelations don't stop there. As Bezos continues his investigation, he stumbles upon another document, a birth certificate filed in Nakuru, Kenya, listing Dr. Elena Vargas as the mother of one Lucas Mwangi. The date of birth aligns perfectly with the timeline of her departure from Amazon. Suddenly, pieces of the puzzle start falling into place. The scar on Lucas's wrist matching descriptions of a distinctive mark found on infants born prematurely. The recurring nightmares about a man who resembles Bezos. And most chillingly, the knowledge of events from Bezos's past that Lucas couldn't possibly have known unless he was connected to him in ways neither of them fully understood. Bezos feels a cold sweat break out across his forehead as the implications sink in. If Lucas is indeed Dr. Vargas's son, then it's conceivable, even likely, that Bezos played a role in shaping the trajectory of their lives, however unintentionally. The thought fills him with a mixture of guilt and dread, but also an insatiable need to know the full story. Over the next few days, Bezos becomes consumed by his quest for answers. He reaches out to former employees who worked alongside Dr. Vargas, piecing together snippets of her life before and after her tenure at Amazon. One retired engineer recalls hearing whispers of a romantic relationship between her and a senior executive, a scandal that supposedly led to her abrupt exit. Another source mentions seeing her shortly before her disappearance, visibly distraught and speaking of threats made against her safety. The trail eventually leads Bezos to Nairobi, where he hires a private investigator to dig deeper into Dr. Vargas's final years. What they uncover is both heartbreaking and infuriating. After leaving Amazon, she returned to Kenya, where she struggled to rebuild her life amidst mounting financial pressures. Despite her efforts to secure funding for her research, she faced constant rejection, her reputation tarnished by the allegations that followed her from Seattle. Then, tragedy struck. She died under mysterious circumstances shortly after giving birth to Lucas, leaving him orphaned and alone. As Bezos absorbs these findings, a wave of shame washes over him. He realizes now that his decision to terminate her employment wasn't just a professional judgment call, It was a catalyst for a chain of events that destroyed her life and left her child abandoned. The weight of this realization threatens to crush him, but instead of retreating into denial, he resolves to make amends. Meanwhile, Lucas adjusts to life in Seattle, navigating the surreal transition from an orphanage in rural Kenya to a sprawling estate filled with luxuries he's never known. At first, he keeps to himself, spending hours in the sprawling library or tinkering with gadgets in the basement workshop Bezos set up for him. But as the days pass, he begins to open up, sharing stories of his childhood and revealing glimpses of the sharp intellect and boundless creativity that drew Bezos to him in the first place. One evening, as they sit together in the living room, Lucas asks a question that catches Bezos off guard. "Why did you choose me?" Bezos hesitates, unsure how much to reveal. Finally, he settles on a partial truth. "Because I saw something special in you," he says, "something I think the world needs more of." Lucas studies him for a moment, then nods slowly. "I think I saw something in you too," he replies cryptically, his gaze locking onto Bezos's with unsettling intensity. In that moment, Bezos knows the truth can't stay buried forever. Whatever secrets lie between them, they will eventually come to light. And when they do, nothing will ever be the same again. The private investigator's report arrives on a rainy Seattle morning, delivered in a plain manila envelope that seems almost too ordinary to contain the weight of its contents. Jeff Bezos sits at his desk, staring out the window as raindrops streak down the glass, distorting the view of the meticulously landscaped gardens outside. He hesitates before opening the envelope, knowing that whatever lies within will irrevocably alter not only his understanding of Lucas, but also his perception of himself. When he finally pulls out the documents, they are accompanied by a handwritten note from the investigator. This case was more complex than anticipated. Proceed with caution. Bezos takes a deep breath and begins to read, immersing himself in the life of a woman whose brilliance once promised to change the world, and whose untimely demise left behind a legacy of unanswered questions. Dr. Elena Vargas was born in Nakuru, Kenya, the daughter of a local school teacher and a British expatriate who worked as an agricultural consultant. From an early age, she displayed an insatiable curiosity about the natural world, often spending hours dissecting plants and insects or sketching detailed diagrams of their structures. Her parents recognized her potential and worked tirelessly to secure scholarships for her education, eventually sending her to study bioinformatics at Cambridge University, a feat made all the more remarkable by the financial sacrifices required to get her there. At Cambridge, Elena quickly distinguished herself as a prodigy, earning accolades for her groundbreaking research on machine learning algorithms applied to genetic sequencing. Her work caught the attention of several tech giants, including Amazon, which recruited her shortly after graduation to join a newly formed team tasked with developing predictive analytics tools for supply chain optimization. It was during this period that she crossed paths with Jeff Bezos, not directly, since their roles were vastly different, but through the labyrinthine hierarchy of Amazon's burgeoning empire. Elena's tenure at Amazon began with promise. She was given significant autonomy to pursue innovative projects, and her ideas yielded tangible results, streamlining operations and saving millions of dollars. Colleagues described her as fiercely intelligent yet approachable, someone who could explain complex concepts in ways that even non-technical staff could grasp. Yet, beneath her polished exterior lay a simmering frustration with the corporate culture she found herself navigating. In internal memos obtained by the investigator, Elena expressed concerns about the ethical implications of certain data sharing practices, warning that they risked violating user privacy and undermining trust. Her warnings went largely unheeded, dismissed as overly cautious or irrelevant in the face of aggressive growth targets. Then came the incident that sealed her fate. A confidential algorithm she had developed, designed to predict consumer behavior based on browsing patterns, was allegedly leaked to a competitor. The breach triggered an immediate investigation, during which Elena became the primary suspect. Despite her vehement denials and lack of concrete evidence linking her to the leak, Bezos authorized her termination, citing irreconcilable differences and a supposed breach of trust. What followed was a descent into chaos. Stripped of her position and credibility, Elena returned to Kenya, where she hoped to rebuild her career away from the scrutiny of Silicon Valley. But the scars ran deeper than anyone realized. Friends and family recall her growing increasingly paranoid, convinced that shadowy forces were monitoring her every move. She spoke of receiving anonymous threats, though no one took them seriously until it was too late. In January 2013, just months after giving birth to Lucas, Elena was found dead in her modest apartment in Nairobi. The official cause of death was listed as cardiac arrest, attributed to complications from childbirth. However, the investigator uncovered discrepancies in the medical records, suggesting foul play. Witnesses reported seeing unfamiliar vehicles parked outside her building in the weeks leading up to her death, and neighbors claimed to have heard heated arguments echoing from her unit late at night. Bezos reads these details with mounting horror, each revelation chipping away at the carefully constructed facade he has maintained for decades. He remembers now the dismissive way he signed off on Elena's termination letter, prioritizing the company's interests over hers without fully considering the human cost. He wonders if his decision set off a chain reaction that ultimately led to her death, and whether Lucas's abandonment was part of a larger conspiracy designed to silence her permanently. As the storm outside intensifies, Bezos feels the walls of his fortress-like mansion closing in around him. For the first time in years, he allows himself to cry, not out of self-pity, but out of genuine remorse for the lives he inadvertently destroyed. He thinks about Lucas, sleeping soundly upstairs, unaware of the full extent of his mother's tragedy. How much should he tell him, and when? The next day, Bezos makes arrangements to visit Nakuru, determined to see the place where Elena grew up and perhaps find closure for both himself and Lucas. Accompanied by the investigator, he travels to the small town nestled in the Rift Valley, its red earth stretching endlessly under a cloudless sky. They meet with Elena's elderly mother, Mrs. Grace Wanjiru, who greets them with a mixture of suspicion and sorrow. "She loved you, you know," Mrs. Wanjiru says softly, clutching a faded photograph of her daughter. "Not romantically, but as someone who believed in your vision. She thought Amazon could be a force for good in the world." Bezos nods, swallowing hard against the lump in his throat. "I failed her," he admits, "and I failed her son." Mrs. Wanjiru places a gentle hand on his arm. "You have a chance to make it right now. Love him like she would have wanted." Back in Seattle, Lucas notices a change in Bezos, subtle but undeniable. There's a newfound tenderness in his interactions, a willingness to listen rather than dictate. One evening, as they sit together in the library surrounded by towering shelves of books, Bezos decides it's time to share what he's learned. "I've been looking into your mother's past," he begins hesitantly. "She was an extraordinary woman, brilliant, compassionate, and brave. But she faced challenges I couldn't protect her from. I want you to know everything, Lucas. Not because I owe you an explanation, but because you deserve to understand where you come from." Lucas listens intently, his expression unreadable, as Bezos recounts the highlights of Elena's life and the tragedy of her death. When Bezos finishes, there's a long pause before Lucas speaks. "I think I always knew something bad happened to her," he says quietly. "That's why I dream about her sometimes, and about you." Bezos feels a pang of guilt, but also a flicker of hope. Perhaps in sharing the truth, he has taken the first step toward healing, not just for Lucas, but for himself as well. The days following Bezos's revelation about Elena Vargas pass in a haze of introspection and quiet unease. For Lucas, the knowledge of his mother's brilliance and tragic fate stirs emotions he struggles to articulate. He retreats into himself once more, spending hours alone in the workshop or wandering the sprawling grounds of Bezos's estate. Yet beneath his silence lies a storm of questions not just about his mother, but about the man who now claims to be his father. Bezos notices the change immediately. Where before there had been tentative trust and growing affection, there is now a palpable distance between them. It's as if Lucas is holding something back, weighing his words carefully before speaking, or choosing not to speak at all. At first, Bezos attributes this shift to the emotional weight of learning about Elena's life and death. But as the days stretch into weeks, he begins to suspect there's more to it, a truth Lucas hasn't yet revealed. One evening, as twilight descends over Seattle and the city lights flicker to life in the distance, Bezos finds Lucas seated on the edge of the infinity pool overlooking Lake Washington. The boy sits cross-legged, staring out at the horizon with an intensity that suggests he's wrestling with thoughts far beyond his years. Bezos approaches cautiously, sensing that this might be the moment they've both been avoiding. Mind if I join you? Bezos asks, his voice soft but steady. Lucas shrugs, making room without looking up. It's your house, he says simply. Bezos lowers himself onto the cool stone surface beside him, letting the silence linger for a moment. Before speaking, "You've seemed distant lately," he begins. "Is there something you want to talk about?" Lucas hesitates, his fingers tracing idle patterns on the smooth stone. When he finally speaks, his voice is barely above a whisper. "You told me everything about my mom, but you didn't tell me everything about yourself." Bezos feels a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean?" Lucas turns to face him then, his piercing eyes locking onto Bezos's, with an intensity that makes the billionaire feel exposed. "I know who you are," he says, "not just as the guy who adopted me, but as the reason my mom died." The accusation hangs in the air like a thundercloud, heavy and suffocating. Bezos opens his mouth to protest, but no words come out. Instead, he stares at Lucas, searching for some sign that this is a misunderstanding, a cruel joke, or a misinterpretation of facts. But Lucas's expression is unwavering, his certainty absolute. "I didn't understand it at first," Lucas continues, his voice gaining strength. "When Sister Mary gave me those pictures and told me to write to you, I thought it was just because she wanted me to have a better life. But then I started having those dreams again, the ones about the man who looks like you. And I realized I already knew who you were. You're not just some random rich guy who felt sorry for me. You're my dad, my real dad." Bezos feels the ground shift beneath him, the weight of Lucas's words threatening to pull him under. He tries to speak, to deny the claim, but the evidence stacks against him. The timing of Elena's pregnancy, her abrupt departure from Amazon, the recurring nightmares that haunted Lucas since infancy. Each piece fits together with terrifying clarity. "How long have you known?" Bezos manages to ask, his voice trembling. "Since before I met you," Lucas admits. "That's why I sent the letter. I wanted to see if you'd figure it out too, if you'd admit what you did." Bezos closes his eyes, overwhelmed by a torrent of guilt and shame. "Lucas, I swear to you, I didn't know. Not until recently. I thought your mother left because of the scandal at Amazon. I never imagined—" His voice trails off, unable to finish the sentence. "But you should have," Lucas interrupts sharply. "You should have asked more questions. You should have cared enough to find out the truth instead of just cutting her loose like she didn't matter." The words cut deeper than any accusation ever could. Bezos knows Lucas is right. He had the power to investigate, to protect Elena, to ensure her safety. Instead, he chose convenience over compassion, profit over people. Now, sitting here with the son he abandoned before even knowing he existed, he sees the full extent of the damage his choices wrought. For several minutes, Neither speaks. The only sounds are the gentle lapping of water against the pool's edge and the distant hum of traffic from the city below. Finally, Lucas breaks the silence. "I don't hate you," he says quietly, his tone softer now. "But I need you to promise me something." "What is it?" Bezos asks, his voice hoarse with emotion. "That you'll stop running away from the things you've done wrong. That you'll try to fix them, not just for me, but for everyone else you've hurt along the way." Bezos nods slowly, tears streaming down his face. "I promise," he whispers. "I'll do whatever it takes." As the night deepens around them, father and son sit side by side, united by pain, but also by hope. They know the road ahead won't be easy. Old wounds take time to heal, and trust must be rebuilt brick by brick. But for the first time, they face the future together, not as strangers bound by blood, but as a family determined to rewrite their shared history. The weeks that follow Lucas's revelation are marked by a fragile but growing bond between father and son. For Jeff Bezos, the weight of his guilt remains ever present, a constant reminder of the lives he impacted through decisions made in haste or self-interest. Yet, rather than retreating into despair, he channels his remorse into action, determined not only to make amends with Lucas, but also to address the broader consequences of his actions over the years. Bezos begins by commissioning an independent investigation into Amazon's treatment of whistleblowers and employees who raised ethical concerns during its early years. The findings are damning, revealing systemic issues that prioritized profit margins over human dignity. In response, Bezos announces sweeping reforms aimed at fostering transparency and accountability within the company. He establishes a fund to support former employees wrongfully terminated under similar circumstances to Elena Vargas, ensuring they receive financial compensation and access to career rehabilitation programs. But Bezos doesn't stop there. Inspired by Lucas's passion for problem-solving and innovation, he launches a global initiative called Future Foundations, dedicated to providing educational resources and mentorship opportunities to children in underserved communities around the world. The program focuses on STEM education, entrepreneurship, and creative thinking, empowering young minds to tackle real-world challenges. It's a project born out of personal reflection, a way for Bezos to honor Elena's memory while investing in the next generation of changemakers. For Lucas, these efforts represent more than just symbolic gestures. They signify a tangible shift in Bezos's priorities. Slowly but surely, he begins to see glimpses of the man his father could have been, the man he might still become. Their relationship evolves from one rooted in obligation to one grounded in mutual respect and understanding. They spend hours working side by side in the workshop, collaborating on inventions that blend Lucas's ingenuity with Bezos's vision. Together, they develop a prototype for a low-cost water purification system designed specifically for rural areas lacking access to clean drinking water, a project Lucas insists on naming after his mother, Project Vargas. As the months pass, Lucas grows increasingly comfortable in his new life, finding joy in the simple pleasures he once dreamed of, sharing meals with family, exploring the city with friends, and pursuing his passions without fear of judgment or rejection. Yet, he never forgets where he came from. On weekends, he volunteers at local shelters and community centers, mentoring other children who remind him of his younger self. His resilience becomes a beacon of hope for those struggling to overcome adversity, proving that even the hardest beginnings can lead to brighter futures. One day, as they prepare for the official launch of Project Vargas, Bezos takes Lucas aside and hands him a small wooden box. Inside is a photograph of Elena, along with a letter written by Mrs. Wanjiru shortly before her passing. "Your grandmother wanted you to have this," Bezos explains. "She said your mom would be proud of the person you're becoming." Lucas holds the items close, tears welling up in his eyes. "Thank you," he says softly, "for everything." Bezos places a hand on his shoulder, his voice thick with emotion. "No, thank you. You've taught me what it means to truly live, not just exist, but to connect, to care, to leave something behind worth remembering. The launch event for Project Vargas takes place in Nairobi, bringing together scientists, philanthropists, and government officials from across the globe. As Lucas stands beside Bezos on stage, addressing an audience eager to hear their story, he speaks not just as a beneficiary of privilege, but as a testament to the power of redemption and second chances. His words resonate deeply, inspiring many to reconsider their own roles in shaping a better world. In the months and years that follow, the ripple effects of their partnership continue to spread. Future Foundations expands its reach, impacting millions of lives worldwide. Bezos becomes known not merely as the founder of Amazon, but as a champion of social responsibility, using his wealth and influence to drive positive change. Meanwhile, Lucas emerges as a visionary leader in his own right, channeling his talents toward solving some of humanity's most pressing problems. Yet, perhaps the greatest transformation occurs within their family. Bezos's relationship with his biological children improves significantly as he learns to prioritize presence over perfection. Preston finds renewed confidence in pursuing his music career, drawing inspiration from Lucas's fearlessness. Colin embarks on a research expedition to study coral reefs, finally embracing his dream of becoming a marine biologist. Christina continues her advocacy work, partnering with Future Foundations to amplify marginalized voices. Even Grant softens, allowing himself to reconnect with his father through shared interests in technology and innovation. As the sun sets on another day in Seattle, casting golden light across the lake outside their home, Bezos and Lucas sit together in the workshop, surrounded by half-finished projects and scattered blueprints. There's a sense of peace between them now, a quiet understanding that they've built something far greater than either could have achieved alone. You know, Lucas says suddenly, breaking the silence, I used to think my dreams were warnings, like they were trying to tell me something bad was going to happen. And now? Bezos asks, looking up from the gadget he's tinkering with. Now I think they were showing me possibilities, Lucas replies with a smile. Like maybe the future isn't set in stone. Maybe we get to decide what happens next. Bezos nods, returning the smile. Then let's keep deciding. Together. And so, as the stars begin to twinkle in the night sky, father and son return to their work, united by a shared purpose and an unshakable belief in the promise of tomorrow. Their journey has been fraught with pain and uncertainty, but it has also been filled with moments of grace and triumph. Together they've proven that even the deepest wounds can heal, and that redemption, though difficult, is always within reach. Years have passed since that defining moment at the workshop, when Jeff Bezos and Lucas decided to face an uncertain future together. Now, nearly a decade later, the world they helped transform is in many ways unrecognizable. Their actions, not us, only redefined their own lives, but also inspired global movements that transcend generations. Lucas, now 20, has become an iconic figure in the global arena of technological innovation and philanthropy. His journey from an orphanage to the halls of power has been documented in books, documentaries, and motivational speeches that sell out auditoriums around the world. He is often compared to historical figures such as Nikola Tesla and Steve Jobs, but his unique approach combines technical genius with a deep sense of social empathy. After completing his studies in engineering and computer science at Stanford University, thanks to a full scholarship funded by Bezos, Lucas founded his own startup, Vargas Innovations. The company specializes in affordable technology solutions for marginalized communities, from portable solar power systems to low-cost medical devices designed for rural areas. Its biggest success to date has been the launch of Aqualink, a scaled-up, commercially viable version of the water purification system he and Bezos developed together. Today, Aqualink is present in more than 50 countries, providing clean drinking water to millions of people. But Lucas's true legacy goes beyond technology. He became a passionate advocate for inclusive education, dedicating much of his time and resources to expanding the Future Foundation's program. Under his leadership, the initiative grew exponentially, providing scholarships, mobile science labs, and mentoring programs for children in remote regions of Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia. Lucas often says in his speeches, "My mother taught me that knowledge is the key to freedom. My father showed me that freedom must be shared." Despite his international fame and recognition, Lucas has never lost his humility. He continues to visit St. Agnes Orphanage in Nakuru regularly, where it all began. There, he hosts workshops to teach children technical skills, encouraging them to dream big while staying connected to their roots. For Lucas, these trips are a way to remember who he is and where he came from, a boy who built robots out of scrap metal and overcame seemingly impossible odds. For Jeff Bezos, the years since Lucas's adoption have been a journey of self-discovery and redemption. While he is still remembered as the visionary who revolutionized e-commerce, his reputation has evolved significantly. Today, he is seen as an example of how power and wealth can be used to drive positive change, as long as they are accompanied by introspection and accountability. Bezos has spent the last few years gradually stepping back from day-to-day operations. At Amazon, delegating more responsibility to the company's executives while focusing on philanthropic initiatives. In addition to the Future Foundations, he launched the Bezos Global Impact Fund, an independent arm dedicated to addressing systemic inequities in areas such as health, housing, and climate justice. One of the fund's most ambitious projects is building sustainable cities in vulnerable regions, combining advanced technology with traditional practices to create resilient, self-sufficient communities. However, the most notable change in Bezos's approach to business has not been his personal life, but his personal life. He has finally managed to rebuild bridges with his biological children, creating a family dynamic that, while imperfect, is genuinely loving. Preston, now a successful music producer, has collaborated with Lucas on several soundtracks for social awareness campaigns. Colin leads a marine research institute that receives partial funding from the Bezos Global Impact Fund. Christina continues to be an influential voice in activism, while Grant has found his passion in documentary photography, capturing powerful images of communities impacted by his father's initiatives. Bezos also wrote a memoir titled The Weight of Choices, in which he reflects on the mistakes of his past and the lessons he learned from working with Lucas. The book became a global bestseller, praised for its brutal honesty and message of hope. In an interview with Time magazine, Bezos said, "I used to think legacy was about what you build. Now I know it's about who you touch and how you help them build something better." Bezos and Lucas's work together has inspired a new generation of leaders committed to the idea that success should be measured not just for profit, but for the positive impact it creates. Companies around the world have begun to adopt models similar to those implemented by Bezos in his reforms within Amazon, prioritizing ethics, transparency, and social responsibility. Youth-led movements have emerged in response to Lucas's example, demanding changes in public policies related to education, health, and the environment. One such initiative, called Youth for Tomorrow, was founded by a group of teenagers inspired by Lucas during a conference organized by Future Foundations. They developed an online platform that connects students from different parts of the world, allowing them to share ideas and collaborate on projects with local impact. In less than 5 years, the platform had more than 10 million registered users, generating innovations ranging from environmental monitoring apps to digital literacy programs. Another important milestone was the creation of the Global Innovation Summit, an annual event organized by Lucas and sponsored by Bezos. The event brings together scientists, artists, activists and entrepreneurs from all corners of the planet to discuss creative solutions to humanity's most pressing challenges. During the last meeting held in Tokyo, Lucas took the stage to receive the Alternative Nobel Prize, awarded for his exceptional contribution to human progress. In his acceptance speech, he dedicated the award to 3 people: his mother, Elena, his father, Jeff, and all the children who, like him, fight against the odds to build a better future. Today, as he gazes out at the Seattle skyline from his lakeside home, Bezos feels a peace that once seemed unattainable. He knows there is still much work to be done, but he also recognizes that the path he has chosen, although difficult, has been worth every step. Lucas, on the other hand, looks to the future with cautious optimism. He understands that the world still faces enormous challenges, but he firmly believes that small collective actions can lead to big changes. Together, father and son have proven that true legacy lies not in monuments erected or numbers accumulated, but in lives touched and transformed. They have shown that even in the face of painful secrets and irreparable mistakes, it is possible to find forgiveness, purpose, and a new beginning. As the sun sets over Lake Washington, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple, Bezos and Lucas are back in the workshop, surrounded by tools, prototypes, and unfinished dreams. They know the work is never done, but they also know that as long as they are together, any obstacle can be overcome. And so, with hearts full of gratitude and minds open to the unknown, they continue to decide, together, what happens next. While Jeff Bezos has become a symbol of personal transformation and social responsibility, his inner journey has been marked by ups and downs. In the early years after adopting Lucas, he faced moments of self-doubt and guilt, questioning whether his actions were enough to make up for the harm done in the past. This internal struggle led him to seek deeper forms of self-discovery, including intensive therapy and even spiritual retreats in remote places, such as Buddhist monasteries in Tibet and indigenous communities in the Brazilian Amazon. During these travels, Bezos learned lessons that transcended the materialism and pragmatism that had guided much of his life. He began to see the world not as a chessboard where strategies needed to be coldly calculated, but as an interconnected web of lives and stories. This new perspective directly influenced his business and philanthropic decisions. A striking example of this shift was his approach to the climate crisis. Inspired by conversations with indigenous leaders during his retreats, Bezos founded the Amazon Guardians Initiative, a global program dedicated to preserving tropical forests and protecting the rights of native peoples. The project combined advanced technology, such as drones equipped with sensors to monitor illegal deforestation, with traditional conservation practices. Bezos often personally visited the communities benefiting from the program, listening to their stories and learning about their cultures. These experiences helped him reconnect with humanity in ways he never imagined possible. However, not all of the changes were easy. Bezos faced criticism from some in the media and the public who accused his initiatives of being merely strategic or insufficient to repair decades of aggressive corporate practices. In response, he decided to give up a significant portion of his personal fortune, transferring billions of dollars to independent foundations led by experts in areas such as racial justice, gender equality, and education reform. This decision surprised many observers, solidifying his image as someone who was truly committed to change. For Lucas, fame and recognition came with enormous pressures. Although he was celebrated as a prodigy and a role model, these expectations sometimes weighed heavily on his shoulders. He knew that many people saw in him not only a brilliant inventor, but also proof that any child, regardless of their background, could overcome adversity and achieve great things. This made him acutely conscious of every word he said and every action he took. Behind the scenes, Lucas struggled with the feeling that he constantly had to prove something, not just to the world, but to himself. He often reflected on his childhood in foster care, wondering if he truly deserved everything he had achieved or if it was simply a product of circumstance. It was during one of these internal crises that he decided to write an autobiographical book titled From Dust to Dreams, in which he shared his most intimate and vulnerable memories. The book quickly became a global phenomenon, touching the hearts of readers of all ages. In it, Lucas spoke candidly about the traumas of his childhood, the anguished dreams that haunted him, and the complex relationship with his adoptive father. He also discussed universal themes such as identity, belonging, and purpose. One line from the book has become particularly iconic. "No one is born a hero. We are all made of scars." The book's publication coincided with the release of a documentary of the same name produced by National Geographic. Directed by a renowned filmmaker, the film combined interviews, archival footage, and animation to tell Lucas's story from his days in the orphanage to his rise as a global visionary. The documentary ended with a moving scene, Lucas returning to St. Agnes Orphanage to dedicate a new innovation center built with funding from future foundations. As he embraced the children who now called the place home, it was impossible not to feel the poetic circularity of his journey. Bezos's transformation not only brought him closer to Lucas, but also allowed him to rebuild genuine bonds with his other children. Preston, who initially resisted Bezos's reconciliation efforts, eventually found inspiration in Lucas's work. The two began collaborating on music projects focused on social causes, creating soundtracks for mental health awareness campaigns and inclusive education. A joint album titled Echoes of Hope received critical acclaim, Tika, and raised millions of dollars for charities. Colin, on the other hand, found his calling by combining his passion for marine biology with Bezos's environmental initiatives. He led scientific expeditions funded by the Amazon Guardians Initiative, discovering endangered marine species and developing data-driven conservation plans. His research on coral reefs was published in prestigious journals, cementing his position as an authority in the field. Christina remained an influential voice in feminist and anti-racist activism, but now worked closely with Lucas and Bezos. She helped expand the Future Foundation's reach to include specific programs for girls and young women in marginalized communities. Her work culminated in the creation of an annual conference called Voices Rising, which brought together global leaders to discuss issues of equity and empowerment. Grant, the youngest and most rebellious of the siblings, found his own way to contribute. After years of photographing communities impacted by Bezos and Lucas's initiatives, he launched a traveling exhibition titled Faces of Change. The images captured the resilience and dignity of people struggling daily against adversity, inspiring thousands of viewers to take action at their local level. The exhibition toured galleries around the world before being permanently displayed at the National Museum of African American History in Washington, D.C. The initiatives led by Bezos and Lucas have not only transformed individual lives, but have also shaped public policy on a global scale. Governments have begun adopting models similar to those implemented by the Amazon Guardians Initiative and Future Foundations, integrating technology and sustainable practices into their development strategies. African countries, in particular, have seen significant increases in access to clean water and renewable energy thanks to Aqualink and other projects led by Lucas. In addition, the partnership between Bezos and international organizations has resulted in the creation of a new coalition called the Global Equity Alliance. The alliance brought together companies, governments, and NGOs around common goals, such as ending extreme poverty by 2040 and ensuring universal access to quality education by 2050. One of the alliance's most ambitious projects was to build model cities in vulnerable regions, designed to be completely self-sustainable and resilient to climate change. These cities, known as Bezos eco-villages, combined advanced technology with traditional farming and construction practices. Each village was powered by solar and wind energy, with rainwater harvesting systems and ecological sanitation. They also offered schools, medical centers, and community spaces that promoted inclusion and well-being. The first eco-village opened in Tanzania, and others soon followed in countries such as India, Brazil, and the Philippines. Looking back, both Bezos and Lucas realized that their journey was not just about themselves, but about something much bigger: the human capacity to grow, learn, and evolve. They began to see their lives as part of a continuous cycle, where each choice echoed through time and touched lives they might never know. Bezos often said in his talks, "The true legacy is not what we leave behind, but what we plant for the future." Lucas, on the other hand, had a complementary view. Every person we help grow is a seed that can blossom into something extraordinary. Together, they proved that forgiveness is not just a gift given to another person, but also a liberation for the giver. They showed that even when the past is painful and full of mistakes, it is possible to find beauty and meaning in the present, and hope in the future. As the sun slowly sets over the Seattle skyline, Bezos and Lucas sit in the workshop again, surrounded by prototypes and unfinished dreams. They know there is still work to be done, but they also know that as long as they continue to decide together what happens next, the future will always be full of possibilities. The gentle sound of Lake Washington's waves echoes through the living room of the lakeside mansion, where Jeff Bezos and Lucas sit side by side, watching the night sky light up with twinkling stars. The atmosphere is peaceful, almost sacred, as if the universe has paused for a moment to witness the meeting of two souls who, against all odds, have found their way back to each other. Bezos, now with graying hair and deep wrinkles marring his face, seems lighter than ever. He no longer carries the crushing weight of past decisions or the fear of being judged by the world. Instead, he exudes a serenity that comes only with complete acceptance of who he was, who he is, and who he can yet become. Lucas, on the other hand, is in the prime of his youth, his eyes shining with the inexhaustible energy of someone who knows the future holds endless possibilities. "Have you ever thought," Lucas asks, suddenly breaking the silence, "that maybe all of this happened for a reason?" Bezos looks at him, surprised by the question, but also intrigued. "What do you mean?" Lucas gestures vaguely toward the lake, the stars, the world beyond the windows. "Everything we've been through, my mom, you, me, the orphanage, future foundations, everything. Maybe it wasn't just about the two of us. Maybe it was about showing people that no matter how broken things seem, there's always a way to fix them." Bezos smiles, a genuine smile that reaches his eyes. "I think your mom would have liked that idea," he says softly. "She always believed that knowledge could change the world." "She did," Lucas replies, holding up the locket containing her photograph, a gift from Bezos years ago. "But she didn't do it alone. We did, you and me." Bezos places a hand on Lucas's shoulder, squeezing it lightly. "Yes, we did. And we will continue to do so." The two remain silent for a long time, absorbing the meaning of these words. They know that the work is never done, that there will always be challenges to face and injustices to right. But they also know that, as long as they are together, no obstacle will be too great to overcome. In the years since, the story of Jeff Bezos and Lucas has continued to inspire millions around the world. Books, films, and documentaries have been produced to tell their story, but the true impact of their lives lies in the small, everyday changes that occur thanks to the initiatives they helped create. Children who once lived without access to education now dream of becoming scientists, artists, and leaders. Communities that struggled with poverty and social exclusion now thrive, fueled by sustainable technologies and inclusive practices. The Global Innovation Summit has become one of the most important events on the planet, bringing together brilliant minds of all ages and backgrounds. During one memorable issue, a 12-year-old inventor unveils a device that purifies polluted air using genetically modified plants, an invention directly inspired by Aqualink. When she accepts the Young Innovator of the Year award, she dedicates her win to Lucas, saying, "He showed me that even a girl from a small village can change the world." Bezos, now in his 70s, spends much of his time overseeing the growth of the Amazon Guardians Initiative and mentoring young social entrepreneurs. He is writing a second autobiography titled The Infinite Horizon, in which he reflects on the importance of thinking beyond oneself and embracing the unknown. The book ends with a simple but powerful quote: "The future is not something that happens to us, it is something we create together." Lucas, for his part, continues to push the boundaries of what is possible. He leads an international team of scientists and engineers developing groundbreaking technologies to combat the climate crisis. His greatest achievement to date is the launch of the Skynet Renewal Project, a global network of satellites designed to monitor and mitigate the impacts of climate change in real time. The project is hailed as a milestone in human history, proving that cooperation and innovation can overcome even the greatest challenges. But for Lucas, the greatest triumph lies not in the inventions or the awards, but in the human connections he helps build. He regularly visits St. Agnes Orphanage, where it all began, to remind children that they have the power to shape their own destinies. "You don't have to wait for the future," he often says. "You can create it now." The Bezos family grows and evolves with the times. Preston releases a solo album that becomes an anthem for mental health movements, while Colin leads scientific expeditions that discover new life forms in the deep oceans. Christina founds AA Global Organization, dedicated to promoting racial and gender equality, and Grant published a book of photographs titled Roots and Wings, which celebrates human diversity. Even Mackenzie Scott, though distant, maintains a cordial relationship with Bezos, occasionally collaborating on philanthropic projects. She admits in an interview that, despite their differences, they both share the same desire to leave the world a better place than they found it. Years later, when Bezos passed away peacefully at his home, surrounded by his family and friends, Lucas wrote a public letter that was read by millions around the world. In it, he reflected on the man his father became and the legacy he left behind. "My father was not perfect," Lucas writes, "but he was human. And it was in that humanity that he found his greatest strength. He taught me that it is never too late to change, to love, to make a difference." At the funeral, held in a quiet clearing near the lake, Lucas hands each guest a small box containing a tree seed. "Plant this," he instructs. "Let it grow as a reminder that, like a tree, our choices can blossom far beyond our lifetimes." As the guests depart, taking the seeds with them, Lucas stands behind, looking toward the horizon. He knows that his father's work and his own does not end here. It is a living, breathing legacy through every life touched, every community transformed, every dream realized. And so, with a heart full of gratitude and an eye fixed on the future, Lucas resolves to continue what they started together. Because after all, the future is not something that happens to us. It is something we create.